My name is Ji Yeon Kim, a graduate student studying American literature at Korea University. I really appreciate this chance to present and participate at the ASLE conference, and I hope to learn much from the event. Thank you. I will start my presentation right away due to time constraints. Uninhabitable Space for Men, The American West and Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. Blood Meridian, or The Evening Redness in the West, is a novel by Cormac McCarthy, published in 1985. The narrative centers on men wandering about the American West in the mid-1800s. This novel is especially renowned for its brutal portrayal of violence, exclusion of women, and its outstanding depiction of the Wild West. The first question that we need to address is, why is the American West so symbolic? In 1893, Frederick Jackson Turner, a historian, delivers a speech. In The Significance of the American Frontier, he argues that the American West had a role in shaping America's frontiersman spirit and masculinity. Turner notes how the wilderness was a new field of opportunity, a gate of escape from the bondage of the past, and freshness and confidence and scorn of older society. According to Turner, men in the 1800s believed that they could go out to the West to have a new chance in life and grow up to be men. He argues that it was to the frontier the American intellect owes its striking characteristics, that coarseness and strength combined with acuteness and inquisitiveness, the practical, inventive turn of mind, quick to find expedients, the masterful grasp of material things, lacking in the artistic, but powerful to effect great ends, that restless, nervous energy, that dominant individualism, these are the traits of the frontier. So the frontier, or the Wild West, after all, was believed to have played a role in supporting men to flourish as masculine figures. And this place is repeatedly summoned by writers who reproduce the theme of masculinity in the U.S. And in Blood Meridian, one odd description of the American West caught my eye. They rode on, and the sun in the east flushed pale streaks of light, and then a deeper run of color, like blood seeping up in sudden reaches, flaring plain-wise, and where the earth drained up into the sky at the edge of creation, the top of the sun rose out of nothing like the head of a great red phallus. It sat squat and pulsing and malevolent behind them, the shadows like tentacles to bind men to the darkness yet to come. They rode with their heads down, faceless under their hats, like an army asleep on the march. So here the sun rises over the plains of the west, and it is compared to a head of a great red phallus. Jacques Lacan first distinguishes the phallus from a penis, calling it a signifier invested with dominant culture. Widely understood as a privileged signifier for the male sex, Lacan points out that the phallus misses what is signified. In this context, the phallus cannot escape being labeled an imposture, but feminist critics like Judith Butler in Gender Trouble and Susan Bordeaux in The Male Body argue that though an empty signifier and an imposture, the phallus consistently has an effect on men, and it still privileges the male sex in the binary divisions of gender. What is interesting here in Blood Meridian is that the great red phallus, the privileged signifier that rises over the side of growth for men, seems almost demonic. The sun sits squat, pulsing malevolently behind men, and the shadows made from the sun are squirming like tentacles of a monster, ready to bind men into the darkness. Under this bloody sun, men look extremely fatigued, and into this unconventional, strange realm, the novel's protagonist, Kid, goes. So the story begins with a 14-year-old kid running away from his home and his father. However, the Wild West is not a place that a kid can survive on his own. In order to survive, he must team up with other men. So he joins the militia of Captain White. Captain White is a special figure. He is known to give men a chance to raise themselves in the world and set men's feet in the path of righteousness. At their first encounter, the captain delivers a speech. What we are dealing with is a race of degenerates. There is no government in Mexico. Hell, there's no God in Mexico, never will be. We are dealing with the people manifestly incapable of governing themselves. And do you know what happens with people who cannot govern themselves? That's right, others come in to govern for them. His speech immediately reminds the readers of the ideas of manifest destiny that legitimizes conquering North America for the sake of democracy and religion. But there is a twist. While White vehemently delivers his speech, the kid rubbed the palm of his hand on the knees of his filthy jeans. He glances at the man beside him, but he seems to be asleep. Men listening to White are either not attentive or sleeping. It's clear that the crowd is not aroused by the words of this symbolic frontiersman figure. And in just after a few pages, a group of Comanche Indians attack White and his men. The bloody battle is almost too violent to mention here. White's men are not only slaughtered, but dismembered in every body part imaginable. The kid, being our protagonist, luckily escapes, and on his way to Chihuahua City, he witnesses the chopped head of Captain White in a glass carboy of clear mescal, where the captain's hair was afloat and his eyes turned upward in a pale face. Death of Captain White announces that the typical Bildungsroman narrative of frontier masculinity is no longer valid. The novel turns away from the conventions and throws out the kid in the open, where he has no other choice but to run away again. This teenage figure looking for ways to survive joins John Joel Glanton's group of mercenaries. Unlike Captain White, who involves ideologies to legitimize his ways for violence, Glanton is simple. This killing machine scalps men for money. What is interesting here is that Glanton does not seem like the only man in power. Another man seems to have almost equal or even more power over the company, and his name is Judge Holden. Judge Holden is the most controversial character in this book. He weighs 24 stone, which is more than 300 pounds, without a single hair to his extraordinarily white skin, who also claims that he never sleeps. This superhuman figure is the talk of all men. Tobin from Glanton's gang recalls how the judge rode side by side with Glanton at their first encounter, conversing almost like brothers. Though both are powerful figures, they don't seem to feel threatened by each other's presence. This oddity, I believe, is possible because, though standing on the same ground, they have completely different, distinguishable desires, and thus belong to different realms. Glanton belongs to the geographical space of the West, and the judge, on the other hand, obsesses over the site that sets ground for the myth of Western masculinity. And this can be traced to how they interact with the natural environment and animals of the Wild West. So John Joel Glanton is the man in control of the gang. The members look up to meet Glanton's eyes before proceeding on to anything. For example, Black Jackson, when harassed and offended by White Jackson, who is also a member of the gang, looks into Glanton's direction for approval. Once the eyes have met, Black Jackson brings out a Bowie knife to swipe off the head of White Jackson. This episode indicates that the glances of men often mean more than words in a homosocial environment. The gang members always have their eyes on Glanton, and the easiest way perhaps for Glanton to win and maintain his lead position would be to perform violence at the eyes of his fellow men. In one episode, Glanton would level his huge pistol at a cat strolling by and thumb back the hammer. While he does this, everyone will watch him. Well aware of the glances, he goes further to shoot the birds in the sky and the goat on the wall. This puts the whole town to dead silence and gives Glanton authority. Glanton roams around the plains with his gun and claims authority over the land that he stands on. He uses nature and animals as a tool to solidify himself as a powerful figure in the society that he belongs to. Whereas the judge shows a different attitude towards nature. The judge is a strange figure who doesn't show much interest in fellow men, but stops at the sight of a small plant on the ground. After days of writing, the judge would take his time to sit down and press the leaves of trees into his ledger book. He would study, sketch, and record them in precision. When one of the gang members told Vine and asked what was his purpose in all this, the judge would answer that it is his goal to become the suzerain of the earth, the ruler above all other rulers. He has little concern about the doings of people on the land where he sets his feet. He wishes to have supreme authority over everything, even transcending time and space. Unlike Glanton, nature is a challenging subject to the judge because it is intractable. It is everywhere and its origins are unknown. It exists, expands, and perishes without anyone's, including his consent. He is aware that the person who takes control of nature, or the person who seems to take control, will be in great advantage. In the book, there is an episode where the itinerant magicians spare time to tell the fortunes of the gang members. While the other men are absorbed at the event, the judge, like a great ponderous djinn, steps into the fire set in the circle of men. The narrator describes the judge's action as a performance. The way he stepped in the fire was as if he were in some way native to their element. In order to most effectively accomplish his goal of becoming the sole ruler of the earth, he stresses himself in special relations to nature. Going back to the first scene I've mentioned in this presentation on how the sun is compared to a phallus, it is not surprising that the judge, who longs to be the overruling phallic figure, walks up from the east just as the sun would rise out of the horizon. How the judge and the sun visually overlap reminds the readers that the judge is well off on his way to accomplish his goal. So this never sleeping, never perishing superhuman figure seems almost indestructible, but the narrator doesn't forget to hint at the fissures. While the judge progresses toward his ultimate goal, we must not forget that the kid has joined the gang. This kid can neither read nor write, meaning he has no understanding of the world beyond what is seen. Symbols, myths, and taboos that the judge obsesses over are concepts unknown to the kid. On their journey together, one of the gang members, Brown, gets injured. He has an arrow stuck on his leg close to his groins. Brown, badly hurt, pleads the members to help him pull the arrow out, but everyone turns away from him. So the kid volunteers to help Brown and follows Brown's instructions to push and pull the arrow. The kid withdrew the shaft from the man's leg smoothly, and the man bowed on the ground in a lurid female motion and wheezed raggedly through his teeth. Brown lay there a moment, and then he sat up, rose, and went off to make his bed. In a strictly homosocial environment, Brown seems to have experienced pain, but in a sexual way. At this sight, the ex-priest calls the kid aside. He scolds the kid for his actions, saying, "Don't you know he would have took you with him? He would have took you, boy, like a bride to an altar." The kid does not understand what this means, but the ex-priest also cannot explain things further, because the things left unsaid involve sexuality that deviates from the norms, and it endangers men from being phallic figures, which is a quality necessary for survival in the open plains of the American West. What's interesting here is that right after the incident the kid has with Brown, the judge shows interest in kids. Though we are unsure if the presence of the kid or the incident with Brown made the judge change, it is true that the judge from then is seen with children lost at war. The judge is found dandling an Apache boy on one knee. From then on, the judge is constantly found with naked children. The narrator doesn't allow us readers to see what exactly happens, but many critics assume that some form of sexual abuse probably took place and that the judge is likely a pedophile. Given the scarcity of information, we cannot conclude that the kid is either hetero, homo, or asexual, but it seems fair enough to say that the kid's presence does bring out previously unrecognized queer drives from other men. And this is probably one of the reasons why the judge announces to the kid, "You alone are mutinous." The kid disrupts the judge's progress toward his goal of becoming the suzerain. The kid makes the judge recognize queer desires, which are labeled as imperfections in masculine culture, to have already and always have existed in him. The kid is a figure that surfaces hidden taboo desires in the judge, and desires cannot be controlled. The judge struggles to hide his yearnings, but he fails, so he tries to find a replacement, the Apache boy, but that is only a moment's relief. For the judge, his encounter with the kid is both an epiphany and a tragedy, because in order to satisfy his desire, he has to risk his lifelong goal of becoming the suzerain. In the end, the judge hugs the kid in his arms and presumably destroys him. This is a sad sight where desire, a possible starting point for love and even change, has turned into the most cruel form of violence. Though the judge survives and accomplishes his goal, he had to kill a part of himself. His survival is ironically suicidal. In Blood Meridian, there is another figure or figures that hinder the judge's plan, and they are the old men. Old men reoccur throughout the text almost like ghosts. Emasculated beings incapable of violence, old men are exiles that don't belong to any gang. They freely wander around the plains of the West. The old men are significant because while other men do not give up their hope in the American West and believe it to be a site of expansion and growth, the old men bluntly announce that men are lost to have come out to the West. The presence of the old men are reminders to men and the readers to realize that the space invested with the power of the phallus does not privilege or free men, rather it confines them. The Wild West is a symbolic site where the strict rules of the phallus takes effect on all men, and the only option left for queer, not only in terms of sexuality, but those disqualified from the norms, men will be either to give up their lives like the kid or live the life of a hermit or a drunkard like the old men. Blood Meridian seems to portray the Wild West that sets the ground for the myth of Western masculinity as a site where men have no other choice but to always be both afraid of living and dying. So in this context, I believe Blood Meridian is a special book that gives the readers a chance to recognize the American West into two realms, the geographical historical region, and as a site where the myth of Western masculinity is rooted. And especially concerning the latter, this mythic space is no longer valid as a site of fantasy for men. Rather, everyone, not only the dead, but even the ones that survive, seem to find the place uninhabitable. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. Any questions on my presentation are welcome. And yes, so thank you very much for listening.